Hi everyone, this is Andrew Prima, Ukrainian American, reporting from Kiev. In today's podcast, week 76 of war in Ukraine, and this is the second week of August 2023. In today's podcast, Russia strikes residential building in Donetsk region, killing 10 and injuring 88. We're going to talk about Ukraine increases drone attacks, and we will discuss what is wrong with Ukraine counteroffensive. Russia strikes Pokrovsk in Donetsk region. In the last couple of days, the Russian army shelled the center of Pokrovsk city with Iskander missiles. According to local authorities, the first strike occurred at 19:15 p.m., followed by a second strike 1952. The military specialists call this strategy double tap, aiming to kill the rescue team that usually comes a few minutes later after the strike. The head of the Donetsk Regional State Administration, Pavlo Kirilenko, emphasized on attack that air attack that Russia used on the city. The enemy delivers the first strike against civilians and the second against the surface service arriving at the scene. As a result of the shelling, numerous 9-story and 5-story buildings, residential houses in the private sector, hotel, dining establishment, shops, and administrative buildings were damaged in the city. According to the latest information, there were 10 fatalities due to the strike and 88 people were wounded. Most of them are civilians, but rescuers and military personnel are among the injured. Deputy Chief of the State Emergency Service of Ukraine in the Donetsk region, Andrei Melchenko, lost his life in this shelling. Ukrainian officials accuse Russia of deliberately targeting rescue workers in a double tap missile strike that killed 9 and injured dozen more. Two Iskander missiles struck a hotel and restaurant frequented by volunteers and journalists in the Donetsk region town of Pokrovsk on Monday evening. The head of Donetsk region military administration said that the second strike landed half an hour after the first, and it was a clear attempt to maximize casualties. So, double strike, which are designed to hit rescuers responding to the first attack, were a defining tactics of Russian terrorists in Syria and also been used in Ukraine. They are designed to sow further terror into civilian population. The Iskander ballistic missiles used in the attack that use sophisticated guidance systems that allow them to land within a few meters of designated target. So in response of all the Russian attacks, Ukraine keeps sending drones over Russian territory. On Thursday, August 10th, restrictions on the flight were introduced at Russian airport Vnukovo and Domodedovo. Dozens of flights were delayed. Explosions near the settlements of Domodedovo were previously reported. At the same time, several media reported that the cover plan was being implemented at the airports, is being implemented in case of detection of unknown aircraft or other objects in the sky that may pose a danger. In turn, the mayor of Moscow, Sobyanin, said that around 4 o'clock in the morning, air defense shot down two Ukrainian drones flying toward the city. Allegedly, one is in the Kaluga region, the other one is in central Moscow. Early on August 9th, Russia announced that Ukrainian drones tried to attack Moscow. One drone was shut down in the Domodedovo area, and the residents heard several loud explosions. Earlier than that, on August 6th, The Russian authorities declared that the drone tried to break through to the capital of Russia, Moscow. Dozens of flights were delayed again at Vnukovo airport. A new campaign of drone strikes has targeted the Russian capital in recent days, as Kiev has demonstrated its ability to hit Moscow and to keep the Kremlin's war in the hearts and minds of the Russian elites and others seeking to ignore the invasion of Ukraine. Video on Friday showed a drone slamming into the ground and exploding near a residential area in the northwest of the city in of the rest of the city Moscow in the Krylovsky district. Russia's defense ministry claimed to have downed other drones on Friday and early in the week on the southwest approaches to the city. Early waves of drone strikes have hit military and energy infrastructure, the Moscow city financial center as well, and other residential buildings. And Ukrainian drones targeted areas in the wealthy western suburbs of Rublyovka district, just miles from where Putin keeps his Novo Ogoryaevo residence. Video from earlier this year also showed that Ukrainian drones hitting a building inside the Kremlin walls. Experts on military drones at the Center of Naval Analysis said that Kiev had a strategy to demonstrate Ukrainian capabilities. Last year, Ukraine lacked a lot of the capabilities to strike deep inside Russia. Starting late last year and all this year, Kiev has demonstrated that it has the technology, the drones, and the drones that can actually bring the war to the Russian territory. A lot of Russian military and civilian targets was struck, along with attacks on civilian territories in a response to Russian attacks on Ukrainian civilians. So, the strike in Moscow, which is supposed to be Russia's most well defended city, and a center of political, economic, and social lives, put some pressure on both the Russian government and the Russian population and showed that Ukraine would not leave devastating attacks on its civilians unanswered. According to President of Ukraine Zelensky, the war is coming to Russia, and we will continue bombing Russian territories. Also, on August 12th, Ukrainian forces targeted the Crimea bridge and a number of other unspecified targets on the Crimean Peninsula. The 12-mile or 19-kilometer bridge, which links Russian annexed Crimea to Russia, has come under repeated attack from Ukrainian forces since Moscow launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine on February 24th, 2022. So on August 12th, explosions and shots rang out in occupied Kerch. The Russian appointed Crimean authorities announced a temporary stop of the traffic on the Crimea bridge to the attempts of the Russian military to strike the bridge. Russian media reported that the Ukraine's armed forces tried to attack the bridge, but that anti-aircraft defense systems prevented the attack's success. It's not known whether the bridge was damaged or not. There is no clear verification, so Oleg Krushkov, an advisor to the Crimea head, claimed that the smoke around the Crimea bridge is a smokescreen created by the Russian special services. The Ukrainian armed forces hope to obtain information from satellite images and determine the extent of any damage. However, it's assumed that the occupiers would not simply close the Crimean bridge without any reason, said Yuri Ignat, the spokesman of the Air Forces of Ukraine. He also explained that fumigation as a disguise had been used since World War II. The spokesman also added that similar incident in occupied Crimea may occur in even before that incident and more frequent. So, one more attack in the center of Moscow last week. This one was a very significant strike with a large success of Ukraine forces. The well known Zagorsk optical and mechanical plant in Serhiyev Posad region in the Moscow region, where the explosion occurred, is one of the few plants critical to the Russian defense industry still remaining from the Soviet Union times. One such plant is located is similar plant located in Taganrog region, the only plant that grows crystals for microcularies. And there is one of the plants in Serhiyev Posad. There are optics. These are the weightings that appear both on helicopter and on Russian tanks. Therefore, such plants will be prone to shocks, to those at least to which we will reach. Their destruction will lead to a halt in some positions of supplies to the Russian defense. Indeed, the Ukrainian flying beavers, Ukrainian long range drones, are already coming to Moscow. Of course, our television knows about all the factors left over from the Soviet Union. Reconnaissance, pre reconnaissance, adjustment are carried out, followed by the execution of a combat mission, either a drone strike or an internal detonation. The Russians say that they have some kind of a pyrotechnic compound exploded there, but this can be one of the mechanisms to destroy the plant. That is, they calculate the place of impact, which will eventually lead to destruction of the entire plant. The same optics produced at the factories are sometimes used for missiles. There are some missiles with optical guidance. That is, the failure of this kind of the factory will cause serious damage to the military production of the Russians, precisely as all the wind and watching that they currently have in sufficient quantity. The Russians recently shared a video of a large column of tanks moving through Russia. These were T-80s with Sosna-U signs installed on them. This is one of such advanced tank signs for Russian armored vehicles. Regarding whether the already praised import substitution manifested itself in this, I will say that the Russians have indeed restored some production in the regime of import substitution. Of course, all of it is worse than French or German Carl Zeiss optics, but it's produced, in particular, at the plant of Serhiyev Posad, the Moscow region. I'm asked all the time where there will be when there will be victory for Ukraine when the number of strikes by our drones on the territory of the Russian Federation is greater than their strikes on us. But to answer this question, I will say that our victory will be the main one after the collapse of the Russian Empire into its constituent parts. The world community is now concerned with this issue, and in different countries, the representatives of the republics of the Russian Federation are already creating their governments, their consultative committees, their congresses. This process is already underway and gaining momentum. Then it will be possible to talk about a complex victory as such. Well, victory over the Russian army, which entered our territory, is possible only after the destruction of the last Russian with weapon on our Ukrainian territory, and this is only after crossing the state border in 1991. For this, the use of drones alone, no matter how many, is not enough. They will not block the capabilities of artillery, and artillery will not block the capabilities of aviation in this full scope of its use. Therefore, the use of drones is one of the intermediate stages in the performance of combat missions. No drone can carry enough ammunition to cause maximum damage to any business or even any infrastructure. This requires a sufficient number of missiles or, better, an air bombs. But nevertheless, drones in sufficient number reduce the ability of the Russian army to advance. Well, if it continues for a long time, that is, for several months, constant destruction, constant shelling. For this, you need a lot of drones, and it's not cheap. It will come out very expensive for Ukrainian government. But we are, nevertheless, heading this way. We will destroy the Russian army on our territory with the help of artillery and perhaps already aviation, which will come before the end of this year. So, Ukraine's counteroffensive issues and why it goes slower than all we expected. The offensive of Ukraine began on June 4th. It soon became apparent that the attempt to achieve an early breakthrough had failed. This has led to a series of painstaking analyses trying to figure out what went wrong. The problems faced by the Ukrainian armed forces were not surprising. Russian defensive structures in the south are large, and it's not too easy to penetrate them. They were well designed, and they had time to design them. NATO would like to strike this defense in advance with the help of aviation, but Ukraine didn't have such an opportunity. They also didn't have enough demining equipment. These were known problems that limited the action of the Ukrainian army, as many feared. They were exacerbated by the lack of close coordination between the attacking units and the artillery needed to suppress the defense. After the vehicles at the front of the column were disabled, those struck behind would come under fire from the Russians with artillery, anti-tank missiles, attack helicopters, or drones. All this was not helped by the unusually rainy weather, due to which the ground became waterlogged and made progress difficult. As many economists noted, it might have not been expected that the brigades, hastily assembled with unfamiliar equipment and only a month of training, would perform well in coordinating complex attacks involving several units using different types of weapons. Ukrainians work not only with different types of weapons, each of which has its own problems with operation and maintenance, but also with different philosophies. It is an army with strong Soviet roots that learned to adapt after the creation of Russian enclave in 2014 and then grew rapidly after a full-scale invasion in February 2022. But all the most professional soldiers unfortunately had been lost during the intense fighting of the first 3 months of this war, and those who survived were by now quite exhausted. Ukrainian soldiers also have faced difficulties in conducting large scale combined military battles, largely due to deficiencies in training and experience. The ability of Ukrainian soldiers to quickly master Western technology has given rise to misplaced optimism that the time required to create cohesive combat units can be shortened. Placing these units in the vanguard of a complex offensive instead of more experienced formations now appears to be a mistake that manifests itself in prioritizing Western weaponry over time spent in the field. Even if they were better prepared, the lack of key capabilities would hinder Ukrainian success. The main focus should not be encouraging Ukraine to follow Western practices, but on helping it fight the way it knows how to fight best, which means adopting the logic of attrition. Ukraine will defend Russian forces. It will take some time, though. We truly believe in our Ukraine armed forces and truly believe that the Western allies will help us to beat the enemy. Thank you for listening. If you like my podcast, please share with your friends.